somewhere around 1989, God brought it back to me. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, working for a company, a distributor called Spectra. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. And I was coming in from work, and I was listening to Reverend Morgan Babb's radio station.
Oh, Dr. Morgan Babb.
Dr. Morgan Babb. And they had a quartet on. And I just said to myself, I said, you know what, the quartets ought to quit that stuff. Singing one thing and living another.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord spoke in an audible voice within my spirit. He said, you've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. Since you know so much, why don't you get back in there and work with them? And I quickly said, but I don't know any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he quickly said, but I know all of them.
Wow.
And all I'm asking you to do is just go in there. And from that moment, I went to my boss, a gentleman who worked with Benson Records.
Yes.
Bob McKenzie, who was my boss at that time. He, I told him, I said, God has called me to do a convention for quartets. And Bob said, well, I tell you what, if you got that much time on your hands, then you need to try to figure out how to sell some of these records. But he was fully supportive of it, and our first 3 years were in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And that came about because Dr. Bishop Dwight Pate, who had Church Point Ministry, I went as part of my company, Spectra, to, we had signed the Williams Brothers to their first record distribution deal when they had Blackberry Records. They had an album out called This Is Your Night.
Yes.
So I went down when they did Harvey Watkins. They were signing the Canton Spirituals, so they kind of promoted Harvey prior to the album coming out. So he did a record on Melvin's solo project. And in doing so, I called Bishop Pate after that and said, hey, you know, can I come down? God has given me this charge to do this convention. And he said, amongst a lot of other things, because quartets unfortunately had developed a bad image. Not all of them, but many of them, you know, due to certain things. And they're not the only ones, but unfortunately they were the most popular at the time, so their exploits, if you will, certainly had gotten around to various places. So he opened his doors and allowed us to use his church. There was no way to communicate because there was no internet.
Yeah.
We had no magazines.
Right.
And so we pretty much had to do it by word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
And I would say, and I definitely want this to be in the history books, that Mr. Willie Neal Johnson was the only major group or individual that could grab hold to the vision. And he said to me, when I told him, I said, God has led me to do this quartet convention. He said, Ralph, that's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And if it's about helping young groups, then I'm in. And I tell you, until he died, he was right there with us getting it done. We had others that were there, but Mr. Willie Neal Johnson was, I consider him a co-founder of the American Gospel Quartet Convention.